Hello my dear friends and welcome back to another Star Wars news update. Just as we did yesterday, today we're continuing with The Acolyte. A couple of keen-eyed viewers have noticed something very intriguing in the final trailer for the show. Have they just teased an appearance from Darth Tenebrous, or is this going to be a nothing burger? Now when it comes to confirming new ships, StarWars.com have provided some insight as to those that appear in the trailers. For instance, take a look at this. This one is called the Polan, officially Polan 717. This is a new Jedi transport, a versatile shuttle employed by the Jedi Order. But what about this one? This is the one in question that has fans talking. This ship matches Darth Tenebrous' ship from the expanded universe book Darth Plagueis by James Luceno. And while the book is admittedly legends, Leslye Headland said she was inspired by some of that content. But first, just days after the Acolytes debuted a mysterious new Sith, there's already a hint at who this person is working for, a character from Star Wars Legends who lives in the shadows. Now Tenebrous himself is canon, but any further information like the fact he is a Bith is not a certainty because all of those details come from the EU. But this new starship is certainly a hint. Here is what the book says. Tenebrous' small but priceless starship, a rugged gnome design, alloy wings, and a snubbed nose poking from the artless mausoleum the explosion had fashioned. And finally, not meters away, lay Tenebrous, similarly interred. So something I should point out is the fact Darth Tenebrous was also known as Rugged Gnome, a famous Bith starship designer. And as this post pointed out, the ship seen in the new trailer for the Acolytes looks like it could have been his handiwork. It's a major indication that Tenebrous might very well be the main villain of The Acolyte. And also bear in mind Leslye Headland's words. She said this: "There's also some expanded universe lore I decided to put in, because I thought it was so cool and no one told me I couldn't. There are a couple of really big EU ideas that he used both early on in the series and also later on. This could be Darth Tenebrous. If she's talking about an appearance that is teased at the start of the show and then comes full circle right at the end, teasing a possible season 2, imagine if it's the Bith Dark Lord of the Sith himself. And I don't think it's the helmeted character, they're just an acolyte. The real menace, the phantom menace if you will, could be the master of Darth Sidious. And a question I see time and time again is, legends aside, does Darth Tenebrous fit into this period of the timeline? Well, he does. Darth Plagueis is a young boy during this time, but Darth Tenebrous is at his peak. But I should reiterate, my dear friends, this is just a theory. Now, amidst worries about how the show is going to depict the Jedi and the Sith, we have some very interesting comments from Leslye Headland herself. The Acolyte is about to show us that if you thought the peak of the Jedi's hubris and the gravest mistake they ever made was to let Palpatine rise to power, it seems as though Leslye Headland is going to show their incompetence on a brand new scale. And I wonder how fans are going to feel about this. And having heard many of her comments over the last year or so, I realised there is one scene from Revenge of the Sith she was almost certainly inspired by, and she's going to put a twist on it. In the conversation between Palpatine and Anakin Skywalker at the Opera House on Coruscant, the scene where he tells him about Darth Plagueis the Wise, there is something interesting in the back and forth between Anakin and Palps, and it's this. The Supreme Chancellor said, "All who gain power are afraid to lose it, even the Jedi." And then Anakin responds that the Jedi are selfless. They use their power for good. And then Palpatine retaliates, "Good is a point of view, Anakin. The Sith and the Jedi are similar in almost every way, including their quest for greater power." Anakin is confused. The Sith rely on their passion for their strength. They think inwards only about themselves. And the Supreme Chancellor responds, "And the Jedi don't?" And then of course Skywalker says the Jedi are selfless. They only care about others. And I feel as though Leslye Headland, based on some of her words which I'm going to come onto in just a moment, was inspired by this line. This idea that the Jedi were selfish, but they considered their actions, their monkish nature, selfless. But in fact, they showed a remarkable amount of disregard for those around them. Their stoic and emotionless nature caused this. I'll return to this point in just a moment, but here's what she said. She wants to tackle a key theme of the underdog versus the institution. How an institution as respected, as seen as good as the Jedi Order is loaded with so much corruption and so many problems within. different Jedi Masters taking a different approach, too much adherence to the code, which is definitely something Qui-Gon Jinn later on criticizes them for. So is she going to tackle this idea of dogmatic code versus the living force? And Leslye admitted to StarWars.com she wants to challenge what we think, as Star Wars fans, the Jedi stood for and what they are. Her desire is to challenge us on an emotional level, she says. What does that mean in practice? If I were to predict, there is going to be a lot of tragedy, and the dichotomy between the heartbreak felt by the family of the Force-sensitive children who are kidnapped, and the inconsiderate nature of the Jedi who train them, who think they're doing the best thing by making them join the ranks and train. And I think it's important to note Dave Filoni was consulted on the creative decisions on The Acolyte. And this concept is not unique to Leslye Headland. In the Clone Wars Season 7, the Martez sisters were heavily impacted by the Jedi and orphaned because of their actions. Do you think the Jedi cared? Of course not. And I think this is a fundamental part of what The Acolyte is going to show us. And you know what? I'm very much on board with this notion. And a lot of sadness with it too. The twins, the story of Amanda Stenberg's character and her sister. She tells us to not expect any glorification of the Jedi whatsoever, and I think we should take her at her word. She said this: "I was so interested in a storyline where the Jedi were at the height of their power, and I don't mean the Phantom Menace because at that point, there's a Sith Lord in the Senate. But this is before that. The interactions are going to be very dark in tone, focusing on the duality that exists beyond the simple black and white view of good versus evil. And now that we're just 25 days away, I'm seeing a lot of very interesting comments, a lot of varying perspectives. In our own community, I've seen the word nervous come up a few times. I think there's a lot of fans holding on to hope it is going to be a good show, but they're kind of scared about the implications on the Star Wars established canon. But on the other hand, there are those fans who feel complete apathy, and that's understandable too. My take on this is pretty straightforward. The less this show relies on focusing on connections to the prequel trilogy and the Skywalker saga generally, the better. I think introducing fans to the High Republic is way more important. Star Wars has continued to explore many of the same eras, often relying on fan service, often relying on familiarity, but here's an opportunity for a brand new type of project, one which may have some connections to the continuity but they can be very vague. For example, the beginning of the decline for the Republic, how democracy came to an end, the Jedi being such a huge part of their own downfall. Bringing the High Republic to live action also allows for fresh visual storytelling, a brighter, more elegant era for the Jedi, and how it all falls apart. And I don't know if you guys noticed this, but something very interesting is how at the start of the new trailer they say from the studio that brought you The Mandalorian, Andor, and Ahsoka. But notice they didn't put Obi-Wan or Book of Boba Fett. How curious. 25 days to go. Let me know your thoughts on everything we spoke about in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. May the Force be with you, always.